My name's Kevin Porter. I'm 42. Been driving trucks since I was 25, but I've only really been surviving since 38. That's the year I buried my wife and daughter. One moment, they were on their way to surprise me at a rest stop off I-70. The next, a jackknifed semi turned them into a memory I can't stop reliving. That was 4 years ago. I haven't driven the same since. The truth is, I haven't been the same. They say the road is freedom, but for me, it's punishment. It's an open wound that never closes, a purgatory that stretches across asphalt and time. And still, every week I climb into that cab and drive, because grief doesn't pay bills. Grief doesn't fill your tank. 2 nights ago, I got a dispatch from a logistics company I don't remember signing up with. Midnight pickup, hazard-labeled cargo, Route 666, southbound through Kansas. The name alone should have been a red flag. But I was broke, 3 weeks behind on rent for my trailer lot, and the pay promised a number too good to ignore. The address led me to a rusted-out depot on the edge of town. A man with a clipboard and a stitched-on patch that just read Willis gave me the rundown. No eye contact, no questions. He pointed to a matte black trailer already hitched, said the manifest was in the glove box, and that there were operational guidelines I had to follow. Inside the cab, I opened the envelope. 8 rules, handwritten in red ink. No logo, no signature. Rule 1. Do not look into your rearview mirror between 12 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. Rule 2. If your CB radio turns on by itself and emits a high-pitched tone, do not listen. Shut it off immediately. Rule 3. Never stop for any hitchhiker, no matter how desperate they appear. Keep driving. Do not engage. Rule 4. Between mile markers 31 and 35, drive exactly 66 miles per hour, not faster, not slower. Rule 5. If you see animal carcasses in the middle of the road, stop and move them off the asphalt. Do it carefully. Do it fast. Rule 6. If the inside of your cab suddenly turns cold, open the windows. Trust that the outside air will be warmer. Then accelerate until the cold fades. Rule 7. If you see a cemetery along the road, ignore it. There has never been a cemetery on this route. Keep driving. Rule 8. If another truck flashes its high beams and pulls up alongside you to offer something, refuse it. No matter how familiar the driver looks, no matter what they say. At first, I laughed, some freak playing games, but as I looked around, the lot was empty, dead silent. Even Willis was gone. My phone had no signal. The radio only played static. I should have driven away. I should have turned that rig around and gone back to my empty trailer park life. But I didn't. I turned the key. The engine coughed, then rumbled to life. The dashboard clock blinked 10:47 p.m. I sat there for a second, rereading the list. 8 rules. Each one more absurd than the last. Animal carcasses, fake cemeteries, phantom truckers. It read like a twisted scavenger hunt designed by a horror novelist on a bender. But some part of me couldn't dismiss it. Not entirely. I folded the note and tucked it in the dash. Then I checked the manifest. Pickup location, Milford Industrial Park, east of Wichita. Drop-off, grain storage facility outside Kearney, Nebraska. 2 nights, there and back. Midnight driving only. No daylight runs. I had time to think. Maybe too much. I studied the list of rules again. The absurdity of them clashed with the precision of the handwriting. Whoever wrote this wanted it to be taken seriously. And that's what bothered me, not the content, the intent. I tried to dismiss it. I really did. But the more I stared at the page, the more something in my gut started whispering, "Take this seriously." I folded the note, slid it into the glove box, and fired up the GPS. Industrial Park wasn't far. I pulled out of the depot, tires crunching over gravel, headlights carving a tunnel through the darkness. The road was empty, windless, dead. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel like the whole world had hit pause. By the time I reached the gate at Milford, it was just after 11. A security guard in a reflective vest checked my ID, then waved me toward Warehouse 4. The yard lights buzzed overhead, casting a dim yellow wash over the concrete. 2 men in coveralls were waiting. One handed me a clipboard, the other climbed into a forklift and started moving pallets. "You, Kevin?" the one with the clipboard asked. I nodded. He didn't smile, just motioned toward the bay. "All labeled and sealed," he said. "Just don't open it. Manifests in the satchel." He pointed to a weathered canvas bag zipped shut and strapped to the side of the container. I hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Have you ever heard of these rules?" The man with the clipboard stopped mid-scribble. He didn't look up. "They gave you the list?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. The word came out slower than I intended. He kept his eyes on the paper. "Then you already know what you need to." "That's it?" I asked. "You can't expect me to just—" "I expect you to drive," he cut in calmly, but with a firmness that made me stop mid-sentence. "And I suggest you follow every one of them." There was no threat in his voice, but it landed like one. The second guy, who had been tightening the cargo straps, spoke up without turning around. "You break one, you'll wish you hadn't." That hung in the air between us for a few long seconds. I looked from one to the other, but neither said more. The forklift engine coughed to life and rolled back into the warehouse. Before he disappeared, the guy with the clipboard added, almost as an afterthought, "You're not the first. Just don't be the last." The warehouse lights dimmed behind me. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, the clipboard still in my hands. By 11:26, everything was strapped down and sealed. I climbed into the cab, the door closing with a hollow thud. The inside smelled like diesel and old vinyl. Familiar, but not comforting. I exhaled slowly and watched the red glow of the dash clock blink 11:29. I didn't know what the cargo was. Didn't ask. Whatever was in the trailer, it came with warnings, and the kind of silence that makes your neck itch. Their words echoed in my head. "You'll wish you hadn't." What if I didn't follow the rules? What if I just kept driving like it was any other night? Part of me didn't care. I'd already lost everything that mattered. My wife, my daughter, they were gone, ripped away on a highway not so different from this one. Since then, I'd been going through the motions, collecting miles like I was waiting for the road to finally take me too. But another part of me, the part that still put one foot in front of the other, knew better. As much as I told myself I had nothing left to lose, something deep down kept whispering, "Stay alive." I didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just the habit of surviving. But I wasn't ready to roll over yet, so I'd follow the rules, for now. I turned the key, shifted into gear, and rolled out of Milford. The highway opened up before me, empty and endless. Route 666. The name alone sent a twinge through my gut I couldn't explain. The air felt thicker out here, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes every breath feel just a touch heavier than it should. I flicked my headlights to high beam, scanning the road ahead, but there was nothing. No sign of life, no other rigs, just me, my cargo, and that damned list folded tight in the glove box. I gripped the wheel tighter without realizing it. I'd driven these kinds of roads for years, flat, lifeless, whisper quiet. But this was different. This wasn't just silence. It was a warning, the kind that hums low in your ears and tightens something behind your ribs. I was already tense and the night hadn't even started yet. 1 hour to the Nebraska line. 30 minutes until Rule 1 came into play, and whether I believed in those rules or not. The countdown had begun. The tires hummed beneath me, a low, steady rhythm that usually calmed my nerves. Not tonight. Tonight, that sound felt hollow, like the ticking of a countdown clock. My eyes drifted to the dashboard. 11:46 p.m., 14 minutes. 14 minutes until Rule 1 went live. I shifted in my seat and adjusted the mirrors, the side ones. The rearview mirror I left untouched, already wary of the silent command it carried. Don't look, not between midnight and 12:30. The thing is, truckers live and die by their mirrors. Situational awareness is second nature, but now I had to undo that instinct, reprogram myself. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, trying to think of anything else. The road stretched ahead in a ribbon of black, split by white dashes that flickered like a dying pulse. Kansas at night is supposed to be boring, flat, predictable. But this stretch of Route 666 didn't feel right. The trees that lined the shoulders weren't the usual short Midwestern scrub. These were taller, crooked, like they'd grown bent trying to reach for something and given up halfway. Now and then, the wind would catch a branch just right, and the shadows would twitch across the pavement like something alive. 11:55. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Somewhere behind me, the cargo shifted slightly. Just a faint metallic thunk. My heart jerked before I remembered what I was carrying. I didn't know what it was. I hadn't asked, but it was heavy, strapped down and sealed tight. The paperwork said non-organic, whatever that meant. But if there were rules, bizarre, specific ones like these, then I sure as hell wasn't hauling anything normal. Not grain, not machine parts, something else. Something they didn't want me to see. Or maybe something they didn't want me to see. 11:58. I glanced at the glove box, where the folded rules sat like a loaded gun. I thought about Rule 1 again. No explanation, just a warning. Don't look in the rearview mirror. But what was I not supposed to see? What if it wasn't just one thing? What if it could be anything? Especially out here in this kind of darkness, where shadows stretch farther than reason and the line between real and imagined blurs. The thought sat in my gut like a rock. I laughed when I first read it. But now, my skin was clammy, my jaw tight. 12 a.m. It was like something shifted in the air itself. There wasn't a sound, nor a scent, only an invisible weight bearing down, like the moment before a thunderstorm unleashes. It pushed against my chest and settled in my ears, thick and disorienting, like the pressure drop in a steep descent. I stared dead ahead. My instincts were screaming to check the mirrors, scan for threats, and do something. But Rule 1 sat in my mind like a burning warning label. Don't look into the rearview mirror. The reflex was immediate, like muscle memory refusing to unlearn itself. My eyes twitched toward the mirror, caught the glint of it at the top of the windshield, and I jerked them back down fast. My breath hitched. I muttered to myself, "Stay forward, keep driving." I adjusted in my seat, rolling my shoulders, forcing myself into a new posture, one that didn't include glancing upward. I trained my eyes on the dashed yellow lines rushing beneath my headlights. Then the sounds started. A creaking noise first, soft and deliberate, like weight shifting on old wood. Then came the shuffling, hesitant at first, then more deliberate, as if someone was pacing across metal flooring. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't road noise. I told myself it had to be the cargo, maybe settling against its restraints. But even I didn't buy that either. The weight of the sound felt human. In my periphery, the trailer's interior light flickered, just enough for my brain to register motion behind me. I fought the reflex to glance. That mirror was a trap, and I knew it. By 12:12, my shirt was soaked through. Sweat trickled down my temples and dripped into my eyes, stinging like tiny needles. I wiped it away with the back of my hand, but my gaze never left the horizon. That's when I heard the voice. It wasn't through the CB radio, and it didn't echo from the open road. The sound came from in front of me. No, not in front. Inside the cab. Close. Too close. "Kevin, help me." The words were soft, fractured like glass, and they carved a cold trail down my spine. My hands locked onto the steering wheel, gripping it so tight I thought the leather might tear beneath my fingers. My knuckles cracked audibly. The voice wasn't just familiar. It carried something deeper, a closeness that pierced straight through me. The tone, the delicate plea. It sounded like her, my daughter. I hadn't heard that voice in 4 years, but I knew it better than my own. Every syllable vibrated through my bones. I shut my eyes on instinct, just for a breath. But that split-second lapse sent the truck veering to the side. The tires caught the edge rumble, and I yanked the wheel back, the cab groaning in protest. "Kevin!" I clamped my jaw shut. "No," I hissed. "No." not real. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to. I wanted it to be her so badly that my heart was caving in. But I kept my eyes on the road. The white lines blurred and shimmered with tears I didn't remember letting fall. Another thump echoed from the trailer, not loud but sharp enough to jolt my thoughts back into the cab. There were 5 minutes left. I counted them like breaths, each one drawn tight with the weight of what I'd heard. Then it came again. "Daddy." That word split through me like a blade. I bit down on my tongue hard, trying to force the sensation out of my head, tasting blood where there should have been nothing but fear. Stay alive. I gripped that thought like it was the last rope keeping me above water. Then, at 12:30 exactly, the pressure broke, like a vacuum releasing. The air returned to normal. The silence felt like real silence again, and the voice, it stopped. There was no slow fade, no whisper trailing off. The voice stopped, as if someone had cut a wire mid-sentence. It didn't fade, it ceased. The rules worked. They actually worked. I let out a long, shaky breath and rolled my shoulders, every joint stiff from being locked in place. My shirt clung to me like I'd run a marathon. The trees ahead looked the same as before, crooked and strange, but they weren't moving now. No twitching branches, no sliding shadows, just trees. I had made it through Rule 1, but something deep in my gut told me this road was far from done with me. The next 20 minutes stretched on in brittle silence. I didn't dare put music on. Even the CB stayed quiet, just soft static playing in the background. I sipped coffee from my thermos, the warmth dull but steady. It grounded me, reminded me that at least this one thing was real. And then, at 1:07 a.m., I spotted a green metal sign bent slightly toward the ditch, mile marker 30. The numbers glinted in my headlights like they had been waiting for me. My heart thumped a little harder in my chest, not from exertion, but from the quiet knowledge that Rule 4 was almost here. Between mile markers 31 and 35, drive exactly 66 miles per hour. Not faster, not slower. The words replayed in my head like a mantra I hadn't chosen to memorize but somehow knew by heart. Why those numbers? Why that precise speed? There was no explanation in the list, just the usual bluntness: follow or don't make it to the end of the route. I looked down. My digital readout hovered at 64 miles per hour, my foot pressed slightly on the pedal. The truck responded with a low growl as I brought it up to exactly 66. Then I saw it, mile marker 31, and just like that, the world changed. The trees disappeared. No tapering off, no gradual fade. They simply ended. Where there had once been crooked lines of branches clawing the sky, there was now only a void. Pure black on either side of the road, as if the world had been erased just past the shoulder. My knuckles tensed around the wheel. Then I saw the first figure. It stood a few feet from the road's edge, pale and utterly still. I couldn't make out features, only the faint outline of a face. Eyes, maybe. Watching. Then a second figure appeared, standing just as still. Then a third. My headlights cut through the dark, and the shadows revealed more. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all watching. Silent. For 4 miles I was under their gaze. I didn't dare blink. I barely breathed. My eyes stayed locked on the speedometer and the white lines passing under the hood. 66. Not a hair more. Not a tick less. The silence was absolute. There was no sound from the engine, no trace of wind. Only those eyes and the sense that if I made one wrong move, one twitch of the needle above or below that perfect number, they would step forward. Mile marker 35 appeared like a finish line. As soon as I passed it, the figures vanished. They didn't move away, didn't scatter or fade. They simply disappeared. One moment there, the next, erased from existence. Erased like they'd never been there. The trees returned. I was alone again. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. The trees had returned, but I wasn't convinced they brought safety with them. After the gauntlet of eyes, after the black void and mile marker 35, The return of trees and brush felt like a set change on a stage, something superficial. I watched the branches not because I expected danger from them, but because I couldn't shake the habit of being on edge. The fear hadn't left. It had just learned to sit quieter inside me. I kept driving. The engine purred under my feet, and for a brief spell the night looked almost peaceful again. The dark wrapped the road in long strips of silence. I didn't check the temperature. I didn't need to. There was a deceptive calm to the air, one that made me think maybe, just maybe, I'd passed the worst of it. But then came a shift. Not sudden, more like a hesitation in the rhythm of the cab. The warmth inside the truck had dissipated. It began in the corners, a thin draft licking at my boots. Not enough to raise an alarm, just a whisper of discomfort. I flexed my toes and tapped the heater dial, barely thinking about it. But the air that came out was lukewarm at best, as if the truck itself was second-guessing me. Within minutes, the chill inched up my legs. It was subtle at first, only enough to make me sit straighter, rub my palms together, flick the heater higher again. Still nothing. No heat. The cab's warmth was retreating, replaced by something colder, something weightier. By the time I felt it settle into my chest, I knew. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't the weather. The cold had come for me. It crept higher, crawling up my legs like icy fingers. I rubbed my hands together, clicked the defroster. Still nothing. That's when I knew this wasn't normal. This wasn't mechanical. This was the rule. Rule 5. If the cab suddenly gets cold, open the windows. Trust me, outside is warmer, and whatever's causing the cold doesn't like speed. I swallowed hard, fingers hovering over the window switch. Everything in me screamed not to do it. I was alone, somewhere in the heart of Kansas, on a cursed road in the dead of night. Opening the window felt like letting the dark inside, but the cold was getting worse. My breath fogged up the inside of the windshield now, curling in strange, lazy spirals. I could see my chest rising and falling, my heart pounding. A sound came from the back seat, a soft wheeze, like breath against glass. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I opened the window. Slowly. Wind rushed in, stinging but oddly warm compared to the freeze inside. I cranked the driver's side down too, letting the outside air flood the cab. I pushed the pedal, gunning it forward. The cold didn't vanish immediately, but it loosened like something retreating. My fingertips stopped tingling. My breath no longer steamed in front of me. Then I saw it. A handprint. Not on the outside, but inside, pressed faintly into the upper corner of the passenger windshield. The glass was streaked with condensation, but this was different. 4 fingers, stretched unnaturally long, ending in narrow tips that looked almost pointed. There was a 5th one too, further down, as if it hadn't been pressed at the same time. For a second, I told myself it could have been mine. Maybe earlier in the day, when I leaned over, adjusting something. But I couldn't remember ever reaching that high, not from that angle, and not with hands that big. My hand wouldn't even span that width. Then I saw the print start to drip. It wasn't condensation from melting frost or dew. It came from the inside. A slow, viscous streak sliding down the windshield, like something oily or sticky had been left behind. I leaned in just a fraction, drawn by instinct more than reason, even though every part of me wanted to look away. The air grew still, heavier. My ears rang in the silence, the weight of that handprint pressing against more than the glass, weighing down on my sanity. For a second, I thought I saw something else. It wasn't clear or certain, only the faintest suggestion of a face, a shape, behind the print. A haze, the kind left by breath on a mirror. 2 dark smudges hovered where eyes might be. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was a trick of the light, of my overworked mind. But a whisper deep inside said otherwise, that I hadn't imagined it, that it had looked back. I wiped the glass with my sleeve, harder than necessary. The smear didn't vanish. It spiraled out, thin and chaotic, like someone had tried to pull away but didn't fully make it. Like something had tried to leave, but part of it stayed. My chest tightened. I wasn't just seeing a ghost, I was being touched by it, or stalked, or claimed. My hands trembled. I looked at the steering wheel, trying to anchor myself in something real. I wasn't sure how much more I could take, but I also knew I had to keep going. I stared for a heartbeat longer, just long enough to feel the fear curl down my spine. Then I looked away. I didn't look again. The road rolled on. The trees stayed put. I left the windows cracked. The cold didn't return. I thought it was over. My body had started to relax, almost against my will, like muscles easing after a storm. The cold was gone. The windows were still slightly open, and the air outside was crisp, but nothing unnatural pressed against the cab anymore. For the first time since the trip began, I let myself settle into the seat. My fingers, still trembling from the cold, wrapped tightly around the wheel as I stared at the endless strip of asphalt ahead. It looked the same as it had all night, black, quiet, infinite. But I knew better than to trust appearances. My mind drifted. I thought about home, or what used to be home, empty now, too quiet. No laughter, no light, just walls that remembered the people who'd filled them. I could almost hear my daughter's footsteps upstairs, the way she used to run and then pause, waiting for me to call her name. I never did it fast enough. Now I'd give anything just to say her name out loud again. I blinked hard and focused on the road. The world outside the windshield blurred slightly. I was tired. Bone tired. The kind of fatigue that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much grief for too long. Somewhere in the depths of my drifting thoughts, I began to hear a sound. At first I assumed it came from the truck, a mechanical groan, or the creak of stressed metal. But the tone was different, unmistakably electronic. Thin, high-pitched, relentless. It started as a distant whisper and steadily grew, gathering intensity until it pulsed through the cab, pressing against my ears. Then I realized the source. The sound was coming from the radio. An electric pop snapped through the cab, sudden and jarring. The noise wasn't just sound. It hit hard, reverberating through my ribs. Static followed, jagged and furious, like something desperate and wild was trying to tear its way out of the speaker. I looked down. The CB's orange light glowed dimly. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even looked at it since the trip began. But there it was, alive, humming, watching. Then the tone began. It was high-pitched and relentless, not blaring from the speakers but resonating within my skull, as if a switch had been thrown deep in my brain, bypassing sound altogether and drilling straight into thought. Rule 2. If your CB radio turns on by itself and emits a high-pitched tone, do not listen. Shut it off immediately. I grabbed for the dial, fingers slipping. The plastic was cold and wet? No, tacky, like blood before it dries. I twisted. It didn't move. I tried again, harder. It was stuck, like it had become part of the console itself. The tone climbed higher. It wasn't increasing in volume, but in pitch, tightening like a wire drawn to its breaking point. It felt like it peeled layers off my skull. My jaw locked. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside, and then I heard it. They were whispers, not coming from the speakers but from somewhere deeper, buried under the tone. It felt like they were rising from the walls of the cab, or worse, from inside my skull. Slinking through the marrow of my bones, familiar and foreign all at once. It was as if they weren't being broadcast to me, but rather through me. Like the voice had always been there waiting for the right frequency to ride out on. It said my name. Kevin. Then again, closer this time. Kevin, listen. There was something in that voice that didn't belong to memory. It wasn't how someone remembers a loved one calling from another room. It was deeper, darker, too precise. Then came the words that broke me. You forgot her. You left her. It was like the air turned to concrete inside my lungs, my body locked. The words didn't just float through the cab, they dug in, like claws hooking into soft flesh. These weren't hallucinations or echoes of guilt, they were accusations, delivered by something that knew me. Pain flashed in my skull, sharp and blinding. My arm shot forward without thought, driven by something primal. My knuckles slammed into the CB unit once, then twice more, each hit louder and harder than the last. Plastic split under the force, warm blood blooming across my fist. The sound died. It didn't fade. It stopped completely, as if it had been alive and I had smothered it. Like it had been alive, struggling, and I'd finally strangled the last breath out of it. Silence flooded the cab, but it wasn't relief. It pressed in, thicker than before. A crushing, suffocating stillness, like the truck had been swallowed whole by the night. I sat there, frozen, my chest barely rising. Even my blood felt slower, heavier. My ears rang with the ghost of that voice. Had I really heard it? Or had something used my mind as a mouth? I didn't have an answer. But whatever it was, it knew her name, and it knew mine. I kept driving, the wheel slick in my bloody grip. I didn't wipe the tears this time. Let them fall, let them burn. Up ahead, through a narrow break in the trees, a warm flicker of halogen light spilled onto the highway. A rest stop appeared like a mirage, dimly lit, aging. There was a diner with a flickering neon sign, a single gas pump leaning slightly, and several empty parking spots lined with cracks and gravel. It looked like the kind of place you'd pull into for stale coffee and 5 minutes of quiet. But after everything I'd heard, after everything I'd seen, it felt like sanctuary. Not because it was safe, but because it was human. I pulled in slowly, tires crunching on loose gravel louder than they should have been. Every sound felt too sharp now, too close. I parked and shut off the engine. Silence returned, thick and absolute. But this time it wasn't the haunted silence I had come to expect. This was exhaustion, deep and overwhelming. I leaned back against the seat and exhaled. My body sagged, finally letting the weight of the night fall across my shoulders. My hand was still bleeding, the raw skin torn from where I'd slammed it into the radio. I tore a strip from the rag under my seat and began wrapping it slowly around the wound, wincing with each pull. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep drifting through terror with no anchor. I needed something real, something grounded, maybe a person, a voice that didn't come through static or the dark. For a moment I considered stepping inside the diner, just for a cup of coffee, just to see someone, maybe talk to the cook, maybe hear a song playing from a jukebox. I didn't know what rule might come next, but if I didn't center myself soon, I'd lose track of who I was. 2 rules down. My hand was bandaged, my heart still racing. The night wasn't over, but I wasn't ready to surrender yet. The diner appeared just past a bend in the road, its neon sign flickering with half-lit letters that buzzed against the silence of the night. The parking lot was cracked and faded, gravel crunching under my tires as I pulled in. From a distance, it looked harmless, an old-fashioned pit stop with a single gas pump and a squat building. But as I cut the engine and stepped out, something in the air shifted, like walking into a memory you were never supposed to recall. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of grease and stale coffee. The lights overhead cast a yellowish hue, making everything look older than it should have been. A jukebox stood in the corner, quiet and dusty, its song list faded and peeling. The people, if you could call them that, sat in near silence, eyes glued to their plates, backs stiff. None of them looked up. I took a seat at the counter. The stool squeaked under my weight and the vinyl cracked beneath me. The server, a thin man with dark eyes and a name tag that read Paul, approached slowly. His gaze never quite met mine. He slid a glass of water toward me. "Evenin'," I said, trying to offer a smile. "Busy night?" No response. He only blinked and looked past me as if waiting for something. You folks always this lively?" I tried again, this time with a smirk. Still nothing. A pause. Then finally he muttered, "Careful who you joke with around here." It was the way he said it, devoid of tone, emotionless, stripped of warmth or caution. It came out not as a warning or a gesture of concern, but as something practiced, habitual, like he had uttered the same phrase countless times before, each time with less feeling. The delivery was mechanical, distant, like reciting lines from a play he no longer believed in. I glanced around. The other patrons avoided eye contact, staring down into their coffee or at invisible points across the room. When I shifted in my seat, a few of them stiffened, like a predator had entered the room. "What is this place?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Paul set down a laminated menu in front of me. The plastic edges were yellowed and curling. I opened it, and my pulse quickened, not because of the offerings, but the prices. A full breakfast plate for $1.45, coffee for 15 cents, sandwiches for under $1. This menu hadn't changed since the 1980s. "Doesn't seem right," I muttered, though I could feel my body betraying any hesitation. No matter how cheap, no matter how anachronistic, I was still tired. I was still hungry. Paul didn't respond. He simply nodded toward the back wall. I followed his gaze and saw an old bulletin board littered with curled newspaper clippings. One headline caught my eye. "Tragic accident shuts down. Route 666. Major reconstruction planned." The article was dated over 20 years ago. I stared at the headline, trying to reconcile it with the road I had just traveled. I'd been driving Route 666 all night. The road hadn't been blocked or under reconstruction. It was paved, alive, carrying me straight into the jaws of something I didn't understand. I turned to Paul, confusion lining my voice. "Is this real? That road's open. I've been driving it." He didn't flinch. "Just eat," he said. "Stay warm. Don't ask too much. You'll be all right." There was no emotion behind the words, just an eerie calm that felt out of place, as if he knew more than he was letting on, as if the truth were just another layer beneath this place, too dangerous to expose to light. My skin prickled. I didn't like the way he said that, as if asking questions had a cost, as if answers could pull you under. "Still," I ordered. Hunger gnawed at me. Fatigue curled in my spine. The meal came quickly, a plate of eggs, toast, and bacon set neatly before me. All too perfect, too symmetrical. I ate in silence, each bite heavier than the last. When I finished my meal, I turned and noticed a man sitting alone in the corner booth by the window. He hadn't moved since I arrived, hadn't even blinked, as if time had settled around him. Something about him stood out, especially the way the dim light caught the side of his face, revealing a long, jagged scar cutting down from temple to jaw. I approached cautiously, each step on the diner's linoleum floor somehow louder than the last. "Hey," I offered, voice low but steady. "You've been on this road long?" He turned his head with an almost mechanical slowness, and when he spoke, his voice rasped out like the dying growl of an engine that hadn't been serviced in years. Gravelly, hollow, shredded from decades of cigarettes. "Just follow the rules," he said, voice heavy, the syllables dragging. There was finality in the way he said it, like a sentence passed, not advice given. I hesitated, the silence between us growing dense. "I've been trying," I admitted, eyes narrowing. "But what happens if I don't?" The man didn't blink. His scar twitched slightly. Then, just as slowly, he leaned forward and exhaled smoke I hadn't seen him inhale. His eyes locked with mine, and the crackle in his voice sounded almost like tires grinding across gravel. "You don't want to find out." That was all. He offered no further explanation, no cautionary detail, only a statement delivered with the weight of finality that felt less like an answer and more like a sentence handed down from somewhere very far away. I stepped back toward the counter, trying to collect myself. My radio was still shattered. I needed a replacement. I asked Paul if there was anywhere nearby to pick one up. He shrugged. Don't sell them around here. That's when another man, one I hadn't noticed before, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered denim jacket with eyes too sharp for comfort, stood from a booth near the entrance. He walked toward me slowly and held out an old CB unit, its casing scratched and wires frayed at the ends. You can take mine, he said, his voice low and steady. The gesture seemed sincere. Too sincere. My breath caught. Rule 8. If another truck flashes its high beams and pulls up alongside you to offer something, refuse it. No matter how familiar the driver looks, no matter what they say. This wasn't exactly what the rule described. No high beams flashing in the dark, no truck pulling up beside me on the road. But it echoed too closely, an unsolicited offer from a stranger, the way he singled me out, the casual familiarity in his tone, as if we shared some unspoken history. It didn't matter that we were indoors or that it wasn't a moving vehicle. It was the intent, the unease, the invisible line being nudged. Something wasn't right, and that was reason enough to refuse. Thanks, I said, stepping back. But I'm good. I'll manage. His eyes didn't blink. His face didn't change. But something in the room tightened. As if the walls leaned in, just slightly. I left money on the counter, more than I owed, not out of guilt or generosity, but because I needed to feel like part of the world again, like I was still tethered to something real. The coins clicked softly as I stepped away. Eyes followed me to the door. No one spoke. The air outside was cold again, but real, fresh. I got into the cab and started the engine. My heart thudded behind my ribs, not from fear of what I'd seen, but fear of what I might have accepted. What had I just walked through? It looked like a diner, smelled like one. People moved, spoke, and chewed, but none of it added up. The faces didn't react the way they should. The prices belonged to a decade that had come and gone. And that man, his offer, was just close enough to a rule I couldn't afford to break. The whole thing felt like a mirage dressed in routine, a trap baited with familiarity. I questioned whether any of it had been real, or if I had wandered into some kind of echo, a replay of something older than I could understand. But there was no one to ask. No one would tell me the truth. So I drove, hoping the road would give me answers. I drove in silence. No radio, no sound, but the engine. My mind was spiraling. The diner felt like a hallucination stitched to reality, like something masquerading as human. No rule had mentioned it. But Rule 7 did mention something else. Roughly 10 miles from the diner, I noticed the terrain began to change. The road grew quieter, if that was even possible. The tree line grew denser, casting long, crooked shadows that leaned across the shoulder like twisted fingers. My eyes scanned ahead instinctively, unease blooming in my gut before I even understood why. Then I saw it. A cemetery. It was small and fenced in with wrought iron blackened by age, the paint peeling in long, tired strips. It sat unnaturally close to the road, its boundaries hugging the shoulder like it had been waiting to be noticed. There were no signs, no nameplate, no gates, only rows of pale crosses protruding from the earth like brittle bones. Rule 7. If you see a cemetery along the road, ignore it. There has never been a cemetery on this route. Keep driving. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to ground myself in something real, something solid. But my thoughts began to spiral. If there had never been a cemetery on this route, if the rule explicitly stated that fact, then what the hell was I looking at? Was it an illusion, a test, or something worse, something that shouldn't exist but did? And if every traveler saw it, if they all obeyed the rule, then why was it still there? Why hadn't it vanished into myth? I didn't want to look, but the weight of it tugged at me, low and unrelenting. It wasn't a physical force pulling at my body. It was emotional gravity, ancient and personal. My foot eased off the gas before I even realized it, the truck beginning to slow as if compelled by something I didn't understand. I tore my gaze forward, blinking hard. but the damage was done. The image of those crosses had rooted in my mind. They weren't tombstones, with no names or dates to honor or remember. They were plain wooden markers standing in silence, as if the people beneath didn't exist or had been forgotten by time itself. A strange pressure built behind my eyes. I knew what it was. Grief. Uninvited and sudden. It wrapped around my chest and squeezed. I hadn't thought about them in a long time, not like this. My wife's laugh, my daughter's tiny fingers gripping mine. Their absence had always been a quiet ache, but now it surged, full and brutal. I wanted to stop, to pull over and walk between those markers, kneel in the dirt, call out names I hadn't dared to say aloud in years. It felt like they were there, waiting, like if I just stepped out, I could find them again. But the rule echoed louder. Keep driving. Still, a question clung to my thoughts like smoke. If there had never been a cemetery on this road, then what exactly had I just passed? It wasn't just that it existed, it was how it existed. Silent, deliberate, like it wanted to be seen. And that terrified me. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the cemetery was meant to be a trap, not a memorial. A lure for the grieving, the lost, the ones looking to make peace with ghosts. What if its purpose was to catch someone like me, someone just sad enough to break the rules? Maybe all it needed was one person to step out of their truck and whisper a name, and maybe, just maybe, that name would be enough to wake the dead. I pressed my foot down hard on the gas. The truck lurched forward. My heart thudded violently against my ribs. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't, but I felt it. Something behind me, clinging to the air like fog. The silence inside the cab became deafening. As the cemetery vanished from view, a chill settled into my bones. Not cold like the air before, a deeper kind of cold, one that came from touching something you shouldn't have. I didn't know if what I saw had been real, but I knew I hadn't imagined the sorrow. The road stretched ahead once more, but it no longer felt the same. It felt older, heavier, and the night somehow felt longer than before. The night wasn't done yet, and neither was the road. Chapter 5. The Hitchhikers. The night stretched on like an endless ribbon of asphalt, each mile darker and quieter than the last. My body was starting to betray me. Every blink dragged longer than it should, and a strange buzzing settled behind my eyes. Fatigue had become more than a burden. It was a whisper threading through my thoughts, tempting me to close my eyes for just a moment, to let go of the wheel and drift into darkness. But I knew better. That's when I saw him. He was standing dead center in the road, right between the faded white lines, walking slowly as if he didn't care, or didn't know that a massive truck was barreling toward him. His back was hunched, his shoulders wrapped in a dusty trench coat, and his steps were uneven, like he was limping or dragging one leg behind the other. Long white hair flowed beneath a battered hat, and from this distance, he looked ancient. I slammed on the brakes, tires squealing against the cold pavement. The rig groaned in protest as it came to a shaky stop just feet from the man. I leaned out the window, the night air biting at my face. "Hey! Get out of the road!" I shouted. No response. The old man kept walking as if he hadn't heard a thing. I honked the horn loud and sharp. He didn't flinch. Anger and exhaustion flared together. I threw the door open and climbed down from the cab. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I strode toward him. I said, "Get off the damn road. Are you deaf or just stupid?" I grabbed his arm and spun him around. He recoiled, eyes wide with fear, as if I were the one out of place. His skin was papery, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. His mouth trembled. I'm just looking for somewhere to rest," he whispered, voice brittle like dried leaves. "Somewhere I can sleep. Do you know if there's a cemetery nearby?" My stomach dropped. The words hit me like a slap. A memory of Rule 3 surged into focus. Never stop for any hitchhiker, no matter how desperate they appear. Keep driving. Do not engage. I had brought the truck to a full stop, broken the rule the moment my boots hit the ground and made it worse by engaging him. Words had passed between us, and I had even grabbed his arm without hesitation, each action stacking on top of the last like steps towards something inevitable. Fear surged through me. I took a step back, then another. The old man's face began to change. Skin darkened, sagged, and peeled. His lips split, revealing blackened gums and crumbling teeth. His eyes sank into their sockets, leaving behind two hollow voids. What stood before me was no longer a man. It was a corpse, animated by some terrible force, and it started to move. Its skeletal hands reached for me, bones creaking. I stumbled back toward the truck, boots slipping on the pavement. The thing followed, slow but relentless, each step jerking like a marionette. I reached the cab, flung the door open, and scrambled inside. My fingers fumbled for the ignition, heart pounding in my ears. Slamming the door shut, I glanced up, and the walking corpse was still coming, its decayed form now only inches from the window, its empty eye sockets locked onto mine. My breath caught in my throat as it raised a bony hand and touched the glass. I didn't wait. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it. The truck roared forward, and in the rearview mirror I saw the thing stagger back, its hand smearing something dark across the window. I didn't look again. I just drove. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, hands still locked on the wheel, even though the danger had long passed. My lungs struggled for air, pulling in short, panicked gasps. Sweat slicked my back and dripped from my brow despite the cold, and I could feel my heart pounding like it might crack a rib. That thing had looked me in the eye, its touch had nearly found me, and I had stood face to face with death, not in some metaphorical sense, but in the literal, putrid form of a walking corpse. I had broken a rule and paid for it with the kind of terror that digs deep and doesn't let go. That's what happens when you stop. That's what happens when you speak to the dead. I shifted into gear and hit the road again. My mind buzzed, too awake now to even think about sleep. But clarity came in the horror's wake. The rules weren't abstract, they weren't metaphors. They were survival guides. I had to obey them, no matter what. I drove for another mile, maybe two, before my headlights caught something blocking the road. I barely had time to swerve and brake, the truck fishtailing slightly before coming to a halt. A carcass. Something large, maybe a deer, lay crumpled in the center of the asphalt. Its ribcage was cracked open, and dark fluids pooled beneath it, reflecting the headlights in oily rainbows. Rule 5 flickered in my mind. If you see animal carcasses in the middle of the road, stop and move them off the asphalt. Do it carefully. Do it fast. I didn't want to get out again. Every instinct screamed for me to stay inside, to drive around it, leave it there. But I had broken a rule once tonight. I wasn't going to do it again. I climbed down, boots crunching glass and bone. The smell hit me first, sharp and putrid. I held my breath as I crouched beside the body and grabbed its hind legs. Whatever had killed it hadn't just wanted to feed, it wanted to destroy. I dragged the carcass to the shoulder, my muscles trembling. Every few seconds, I glanced around, half expecting something to leap from the woods. But nothing came. I left the body in the grass and ran back to the cab. As I slammed the door and pulled away, a thought crept in, unshakable and unnerving. Were these carcasses meant to be cleared away, or were they left there for something? Maybe moving them wasn't just about keeping the road safe. It felt more like erasing some kind of offering, like brushing away a sign meant for something else entirely. Was I unknowingly interfering with a ritual, upsetting a balance I didn't understand? I wondered if leaving the bodies would have drawn something out of the shadows, or worse, if moving them would make that something come looking for me instead. Either way, I couldn't help but feel like a piece on a board I didn't know I was playing on. The road grew darker again. I rolled the window down slightly, letting cold air sting my face. My breath clouded in the cab. How had this become my life? Just a few days ago, I was worrying about deadlines and fuel prices. Now I was dodging the dead and dragging corpses off cursed highways. I missed them. More than I had in a long time, more than I could bear in that moment. My wife, with her sleepy smile on Sunday mornings, and my daughter, whose giggles once echoed through every corner of our home. I could still smell the syrup and pancakes, hear the small, eager footsteps racing across hardwood floors. Those memories, once comforting, now cut deep. Grief didn't arrive like a wave. It struck like a hammer to the chest, sudden and merciless. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but the sting in my eyes wasn't from the cold air. It was from the ache of a life that felt impossibly far away. And that's when I saw them. Two figures at the edge of the road, a woman and a girl, their white clothing glowing eerily under the pale light. They didn't move, not at first, and their stillness had a strange gravity, like they were waiting for me specifically. Something about their posture, the way the woman stood protectively in front of the child, tugged at a memory so deep I hadn't realized it was still there. My foot eased off the gas and the truck began to slow. Their voices drifted in through the open window. "Please," the woman called out, stepping closer to the road. "We need help. My daughter's cold. We just need a ride to the next town. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word, thick with desperation. The little girl clung to her mother's leg like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. Her eyes were wide and glassy, and I felt something inside me unravel. I wanted to stop. Every instinct I had screamed for it. But Rule 3 echoed louder in my head than any plea. "I can't," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm sorry." The woman stepped closer. "Please," she repeated, her tone trembling. "She's scared. We ran away. There's nowhere else to go." I looked into her eyes and I saw my wife, tired and scared, but trying to be strong. I looked at the girl and saw my daughter, not in the literal sense, but in the way grief fills in the blanks. That was them, if only for a moment. My hands shook on the wheel. The woman reached out, brushing her hand along the window frame. "Just let her in, just for a moment." That was all it took to snap me out of it. I reached for the switch and slammed the window shut, sealing the cab. "I'm sorry," I whispered, barely able to hear myself over the roar of the engine as I stomped the gas pedal. The truck surged forward, leaving the pair behind, their images shrinking in the mirrors. But then the scream came, raw, high-pitched, filled with helplessness and horror. I looked back, even though I didn't want to. From the darkness of the woods behind them, something moved, something massive and wrong, its form half hidden by the trees. It lunged. The woman tried to shield the girl, throwing her arms wide, but claws tore through the air and the thing slammed into them. There wasn't time to scream again. One second they were there, the next they were gone, dragged into the shadows. No. My foot hovered over the brake, but I didn't press it. My heart told me to stop, to turn around, to do something, but my hands stayed locked on the wheel. I had already lost them once. Watching them vanish again, even as a reflection of the family I once had, was a fresh wound cut clean through me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and constant. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the wheel tighter, every muscle in my body taut with grief and regret. I hadn't saved them. I couldn't. It was like watching my own family die again and being powerless all over. The road stretched on, but I didn't want to be part of it anymore. I didn't want to drive. I didn't want to be the man who followed the rules, even when they demanded I look away from people in need. But I did, because I had learned what happened when I didn't. The road had long since grown silent. My headlights cut through the black, illuminating only the next few feet of twisted asphalt. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. Every sound echoed louder than it should have. Every bump in the road felt like a tremor from some distant quake. My hands were trembling again, not from fear this time, but from an unease rooted somewhere deeper, in a place I didn't know existed before this journey began. The memory of that woman and child, so vivid and so real, was still fresh in my mind. But beneath it was something more pressing, more immediate, a question that wouldn't leave me alone. What the hell am I carrying? I'd followed these rules to stay alive, but I'd never once stopped to consider the cargo I was protecting. Somewhere between the desperation and terror, I'd forgotten that I had taken a job, a delivery, a truckload of something. But I never asked what, so I pulled over. There wasn't any sign or mile marker, only a patch of gravel wide enough to stop. I climbed down from the cab, boots sinking into soft dirt. The night was unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed to have taken a pause. My flashlight flickered as I approached the rear of the truck, heart pounding harder with each step. I reached for the lock and tugged at it. Nothing. It didn't budge. I tried again, this time harder. Still nothing. A knot formed in my stomach. Maybe this was a sign I shouldn't be doing this. What if opening that trailer door made things worse? What if I were breaking the last rule that hadn't yet been written? But then the cold returned. It crept up my spine, slow and biting, like fingers dragging down my back. My breath fogged in front of me, each exhale more shallow than the last. I backed away, rubbing my arms. I could feel them, the things from the road, watching. Panic wrestled with desperation. I ran to the cab, opened the passenger door, and yanked out the tire iron from beneath the seat. My grip was tight. My hands ached. I marched back to the trailer door, raised the iron, and slammed it into the lock housing. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th hit, the lock finally gave way with a loud, metallic crack. The sharp sound rang through the empty night like a warning bell, echoing into the darkness beyond the roadside. The heavy metal door creaked as it swung open slowly, revealing the darkness inside. A cold wave of air spilled out, denser and sharper than the chill I had felt before. I stepped forward, flashlight trembling in my grip, and flicked on the overhead light. The trailer's interior was lined with wooden crates, dozens of them, each meticulously stacked and secured. But they weren't ordinary cargo. Every crate was marked with chalk symbols, circles, crosses, and intricate runes that meant nothing to me, but oozed with ritualistic significance. The light glinted off faded black ink, revealing names and dates etched into the wood. I stepped closer, dust rising in soft clouds as I ran my hand along one of the boxes. My chest tightened when I saw the inscription. L. Porter, October 14th, 2017. My throat closed. I turned to the crate beside it, hands already shaking. Monsieur Porter, October 14th, 2017. My wife, my daughter. My knees nearly gave out as the truth settled over me like a shroud. These weren't packages. They were graves on wheels. I reached for the latch and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a small, faded teddy bear, pink once. Its seams were worn, the button eyes scratched. My daughter's favorite. I used to find it tucked under her chin every night. My knees buckled and I collapsed against the crate, the weight of grief returning all at once. The second box held my wife's silver necklace, a tiny locket, still engraved with our initials. I opened it and found her picture staring back at me. She looked so alive, so vibrant. But these items, they weren't just memorabilia. They were anchors, the last physical connections to the souls that had been taken. And I'd been moving them down this cursed road like packages. A nauseating wave of dread rolled through me. These weren't deliveries. These were entrapments, tokens that tethered spirits to this place. The reason for the rules, the monstrous things on the road, the cemetery that shouldn't exist. It all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Route 666 wasn't just a road. It was a passageway, a limbo. And someone, or something, was keeping these souls from crossing over. I stood there in the humming silence, the cold seeping into my bones, and realized I had a choice. I could finish the job, close the door, drive the rest of the way, and make the delivery. Or I could take back what mattered. I grabbed both crates and stepped away from the trailer. My knees wobbled beneath the weight, physical and emotional, but I didn't stop. I carried them to the front seat, laid them gently beside me, then turned back for one final look at the cargo I'd left behind. The symbols on the remaining crates seemed to shimmer in the dark. Some of the names I recognized, ones I'd seen in old obituaries or highway memorials. Others were completely foreign. but they were all part of this road's secret, a secret I didn't want to be a part of anymore. I unhooked the trailer from the cab and left it behind, wide open and abandoned on the roadside. When I got back in the cab, I didn't drive fast. I drove steadily. With every mile that passed, I felt something loosening in my chest, a coil unwinding. After about 10 miles, I pulled over one last time. The sky was beginning to pale with the first hints of morning. I found a patch of soft earth beneath a wide ancient tree, far from the road, far from the screams and rules and death. The silence here wasn't ominous. It was peaceful. I dug 2 shallow graves with my hands. My fingers bled, my nails split, but I didn't stop. I placed the 2 crates carefully into the shallow graves, setting them side by side beneath the roots of the old tree. My hands trembled as I packed the earth back over them, sealing away what remained of their presence in this world. The soil felt heavy, not just with weight but with finality. Once the ground was flat, I knelt there, hands muddy and bleeding. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the teddy bear, and gently nestled it into the dirt above one grave. Then I unclasped the silver locket from around my neck and placed it on the other. These would be their markers, shaped not by stone or engraved names, but by love and memory alone. I sat with them a while longer, until the sky lightened and the wind softened. And then I stood, leaving behind what little I had been able to save. This was their resting place now, not on some cursed highway, not locked in a crate. Here, they were free. As I made my way back to the cab, I paused for a final glance over my shoulder. The first light of dawn revealed a distant movement, low on the horizon. Shapes began to emerge from the mist, warped silhouettes staggering toward the place I had left behind. They crept like shadows reborn, twisting and crawling over the roadside where my trailer once stood. Their limbs moved in slow, desperate rhythm, circling the trailer with intent. From that distance, they looked almost human. Almost. Their behavior, however, mirrored the hunger of beasts, scratching, clawing, driven by something insatiable. And then, all at once, they vanished. With them, so did the trailer. It faded from sight, swallowed by the mist and the dawn, as if none of it had ever been real. A weight lifted from my chest, something unnameable and long overdue. I turned back to the tree, to the place where I had buried my family. The graves lay undisturbed beneath the gentle rustling of branches above. And there, I felt something settle within me. It wasn't triumph or resolution, but peace, the first I'd felt in years. It may not have been complete, but it was enough to let me breathe again. I climbed into the cab, now light and empty, and eased the truck onto the open road. The sun crept higher behind me, painting the horizon with hope. There were no more rules to follow, no voices to obey, just the hum of tires, the stretch of pavement, and the distant promise that somewhere ahead, something better might be waiting.